I want to talk about a couple of different points about developing loving kindness, particularly as a vehicle for awakening and experiencing that liberation of mind. One part of it is that there is a kind of relationship. I've seen this in my own practice, and there's some mention of it in the suttas as well, between loving kindness and that cultivation of it and experiencing the sort of vastness of the mind, the immeasurable kind of quality of that kindness. And compassion comes in there too, of course, and the other Brahma Viharas, but metta is always the one that sort of provides the basis. And there's a relationship between metta and the realization of impermanence. And so it's not like there's some formula exactly, but to work at cultivating wisdom by being very attentive to the three characteristics: impermanence, dukkha, and non-self. Actually, all three, but maybe impermanence the most. Is that there is a connection there with loving kindness. And the way that I've seen it really be related is in realization of impermanence, or also dukkha, probably not self as well, since you know how those three are really interrelated. Then there is this arising of metta. And it's very interesting because this is why it seems to me like this metta is very natural. It kind of underlies the development of the mind, and it sort of flows in when we let go of or see the structures that we've created and that we're using constantly in order to feel okay or to cope with the experience of being a human being, and so vulnerable to all kinds of danger and harm and uncertainty and aging, sickness and death, etc. And when we cultivate, when we develop wisdom, we see the true nature of reality, and we realize that that's just how it is. There's nothing wrong. Whatever can harm our body is not really going to harm our mind unless we let it. And when we start to recognize these truths, one of the things that comes in is a lot of metta. So I used to say something like, I was convinced that the Buddha was right because at every turn it would come back to love. And for some dear friends, especially this one on my right, that was way too fluffy. And she's been a great help in pointing out where I'm not exactly the most grounded. So we have to come back to groundedness. And it's like it's not painting it all kind of happiness and roses, but it's more about the fact that when we let go of our defilements, what we find there is metta. And as I'm sure you've heard me say, I'm not crazy about translating metta as love because it just has too many different definitions, impressions, connotations, and nuances. But if you really think of that um, unselfish, completely disentangled kind of love, which is that loving kindness, that's not also not a perfect translation, but that selflessness is there. Even the feeling of self or the knowledge of self or the awareness of self, the concept of self is like starts to just fall apart. Then there's more and more of this love, that loving kindness, this metta that is so universal and universally applied, available, regardless of whatever living being you might have in mind. And the living beings in our life and the ones that we never see or may never see all start to take more of an equal place. And that can be very, very hard to imagine from the place of me, mine, my friends, my loved ones, etc. But that's what's not just available to us, but that's inevitable as part of the practice of the path. So there's this relationship between those characteristics and metta. And as we practice metta, and we get some sense more and more of that selfless love, that love without any attachment, that just spreads, like we said earlier, it's not something we have to like radiate out. It just spreads as it fills. And it's kind of like a spring that just keeps flowing. It fills our whole being, it fills everything around us, it fills the whole world. And as we experience more of that, we also have the capacity, I think, or the safety or the basis when we make this metta a basis. Then we have this capacity to really see the truth. That quote I recently talked about of Ajahn Chah, where he says, if you let go of everything or you put everything down, you will see the truth. And if you don't, you won't. And this cultivation of metta really gives us the strength, this facility, the basis for putting everything down. And then we understand our situation as human beings in the world. And in samsara, going from lifetime to lifetime in whatever realm, better. And we have the capacity to develop in that sense to ultimate peace and freedom. So we develop the loving kindness and it helps us to develop wisdom, and we develop wisdom, and then there's more loving kindness coming through. So that's one aspect of investigation or understanding, maybe hope, encouragement. That's part of this practice of the cultivation of metta as a vehicle and basis, and that liberation of mind, even on a temporary kind of experience by experience, and how that's supportive. That's one end of this spectrum. On the other end of the spectrum that I was thinking of, the other point is kind of on the other end of the spectrum, which is the really practical ability to experience metta. And some, often people talk about how hard it is to access that state of mind or open to it. And so in the guided meditation this morning, I introduced a couple of approaches, from the text, from the, it wasn't exactly what we see in the commentary, but the later commentarial material is, talking about phrases we might repeat. And of course, we can have our own commentary on our practice and on what we experience. And, like, how do you calm the mind, deal with whatever the mental states are that have arisen, and come back to or open up to the flow or that saturation of that spring in your whole system, body and mind. And so the things that I talked about in the meditation were, as I said, the standard description that the Buddha gave. I will abide pervading one quarter with a mind imbued with loving kindness, etc. That one. And, sometimes that for people that feels completely inaccessible. And for other people, they, like when we talked about how you unpack that and work with it, then people have good results from that. And the other thing, like wishing yourself well, wishing others well, and having various phrases that you can use. And of course, there's a third one that I think that also comes out of the commentary, which is this idea of first encouraging loving kindness for ourselves, and then for the people we care about, and then for the people we don't know, and etc., out to the most difficult people we encounter. And there are other ways of doing that. For the Western mind, a lot of times we have trouble focusing on ourselves and being kind to ourselves. So the encouragement is start with whatever living being, even a plant. There was one person who was like, she could do it for the plant in her office. She couldn't do it for anybody else. And whatever it takes. And so, that just starting wherever we can start to soften. And sometimes it takes more preparation even than that. That we need to have a greater sense of safety, and maybe figuring out how to find that in our life, in our experience with someone we trust, or in some setting that feels really comfortable and safe. So of course, I'm happy to hear about anyone's experiences or questions around that, or around anything really. And Aya and I had a little conversation about a question we had this morning, and you had more to say about it.
Yeah, tell them what I said, Aya.
Well, it was Chris's question about in meditation, and you can tell me, Chris, if I've got this right. I'm glad you're here this afternoon. In meditation, when we come to a state of calm and stillness where there's you can tell that your body doesn't want to move, or it would take a lot to make it move, and maybe you can't even move, and there's sounds in the background that you can hear, And the question of, is that access meditation, or is that some, absorption, or what is it? And my answer was, don't worry about it, basically. Maybe it's better to not try to label it and open up more, let go more of that kind of evaluation, but know that you're on the right track. And you said, when we discussed it later,
What did I say?
you don't remember?
Not really.
I'm the one who's supposed to be losing the memory.
Something about but like practically speaking, like training yourself to let go of hearing it, like just kind of dropping it and telling yourself, okay, yeah, that's there, whatever. But sort of letting go more into the peaceful feeling and going deeper into the meditation that way by like kind of letting go of the sounds. Like, yeah, it's there, whatever. But you can train your mind to ignore it in a way.
Turn your attention back inwards.
Turn your attention to the pleasant part of your meditation that is making you get deeper. Something like that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and it's the point of the onward leadingness of it, so that when, regardless of whatever we experience, trying not to, knowing that if we get excited about whatever it is, which I'm not saying is what you're doing, but you know how that can be. Oh, something's happening, and then that's it. But the point of wherever we find ourselves, whether there's light or whatever is happening, like you're saying, instead of attending to the sound, you're turning towards whatever is the most peaceful part of what's happening. Or if it's a nimitta, if it's a visual thing, then going into the stillest part, and then just absorbing in that and letting go farther, letting that carry you to more peacefulness. So it's always good to have the practical voice over here.
Yeah, thank you.
You're welcome. We were going to send Sophie back with the message, but you're here to receive it too. So, yeah. So, are there any questions or experiences? Are you having any problem or trouble, or maybe it's better to say, what feels like it gets in the way when you have this intention to experience metta or develop it? Or you're also welcome to share the oh, it was great and wonderful and easy. That's fine too.
Yesterday in our office, we were like wrapping up, and everybody was asking, "What's your weekend plan?" And I told them I'm going for a retreat. So first my manager said, "Oh, you're going for a spa retreat?" No, a meditation retreat. And I'm right now thinking it's so much better than a spa retreat. Yeah, it's become so still and peaceful after the hectic week.
Could you hear Nito? No, some of you can.
Yes, some no.
Yeah, she's very, very prudently wearing a mask, I would say. So I'll just try to repeat that. She said that at work there was this conversation about, what are you doing this weekend? You know how that goes. And she said she was going to have a meditation or have a retreat. And so your manager said, "Oh, you're going to a spa retreat." She's like, "No, I'm going to have a meditation retreat." And she's feeling right now like it's way better than a spa retreat. So calm, so peaceful. So yeah, thank you. Yes, I can.
So I have a question.
sometimes life can become very hectic, and to a point where I don't know. I think my mind becomes very reactive when things are very hectic, and it can get to a point where somebody says a small thing and it becomes like massive in my mind, and so on. Like the smallest things kind of bring out a big reaction. And I wanted your advice that in such a situation, things are really hectic and like mind's reactive. Then what's a wise way of dealing with that, of working with that?
I think the first thing is to slow down. Now, I noticed for myself, like when I was working in high tech and I had to make a presentation, like especially like if it's something big at a conference and you've got hundreds of people, I noticed that the way I would respond to my own inner unrest was to slow down in how I spoke. And it was always helpful if the technology didn't work. Everybody in the room understands, and all you have to do is relax. So you can actually train yourself to notice the feeling of being, I feel tense, this is hectic. Let me slow down. And it seems counterintuitive, like when it's hectic, you feel like you have to rush more, but that's exactly the opposite of what we need. And it doesn't really take that much more time. And it actually saves a lot of having to backtrack. So it's like the mindfulness gets better and better at detecting that feeling. So if we catch it before we say things, we feel it, and then it's like, well, now it's time to slow down. So you take an extra few seconds to think about what you're going to say, and you take an extra like few minutes to observe the people in your space. And then, usually when we have mindfulness and we observe others, more compassion and kindness come up. At least that's if we can clear away all the irritation, but knowing the irritation for what it is, this is not wholesome, it's not helpful, it's not really the truth, because in those times we can only see, well, at least from my experience, I can only see the things that are going wrong, and I don't give enough weight to the things that are going well. So that would be the first line of defense.
Yes.
And that'll take it a long way. Yeah. You're welcome. Any other comments or questions so far? So I think we'll sit for a few minutes, maybe about 20-30 minutes, and then, oh yes, David.
I actually thought of one if it's not too late.
It's not too late.
Okay. Do you have any teaching on how to use compassion to give up perfectionism?
Yes, I think so. I mean, not that I've really thought about this before, but when you tune into what compassion is, really seeing the dukkha in what any of us is experiencing, our own selves or anyone, any living being, then what arises is a kind of acceptance. Because we see the dukkha, we have this really sincere wish for the dukkha to end. And that's the definition of compassion. And we may or may not be able to do anything about the situation. But what we can do, and what I think flows fairly naturally, is an acceptance of this being the way it is. You know, we can be present with that imperfect life, imperfect situation. We don't want it to be that way. We want it to be healthy, healed, happy, comfortable, pain-free, stress-free, but it's not how it is. So I think our perfectionism comes because we don't want anything to go wrong. And we certainly don't want to be the one doing or saying or the cause of anything to go wrong. And we think that we can somehow avoid that. We think that we can prevent things from going wrong, but it's just so not the case. Not in ourselves, and not with regard to anyone else or anything in this world. It has all kinds of flaws, mishaps, everything's falling apart. It's not that we become discouraged about it. It's just to see reality as it is actually encouraging, because this is now what we're experiencing. This is just part of the whole panorama of living life, human or otherwise. So yeah, I think that perfectionism can definitely be softened there, and to a large degree, that's because we're putting our attention on someone else or other living beings. Perfectionism is very much about me and mine. And so as the loving kindness that goes towards every being, including ourselves, compassion that goes out towards every being, including ourselves, increases and becomes more of a portion of our inner experience, then the concern for self diminishes, and so will the perfectionism. That's what I think. And fear. Because I think perfectionism is very closely tied to fear.
Mhm. Yeah, it's like fear of, like I was eating some salad. It's really silly maybe, but I asked them if they wanted it, and I was like, that's kind of a pain to pour on the plate. Maybe I should eat it out of the bowl. And I was thinking, oh, my thing's totally gluttonous. What have I done? I was thinking about that. It's like so much suffering. So I'm like, is that just being perfectionist? You know what I mean? That was an example from today.
I'm not sure. I think I'd have to have seen that in action to get a sense of it. But it's a good point, though, David, of when are we just, kind of monitoring our own behavior patterns, habits, training or lack of training. And we need to, be more careful, get more with it, or whatever. Or are we overly critical of ourselves and maybe others as well? And so that's in that realm of developing wisdom and clarity. What is it that we can just let go of? What is it that we actually need to train ourselves to improve? It's a good question. Sometimes we can get a clue from other people's reactions. Sometimes other people's reactions aren't important because they're not enlightened either. Really pay attention to the people you feel have gained some ground on the path, you might say, the wise. And that's what we'll see in the suttas. You don't want to do things that would be later criticized by the wise. So we can reflect on that. What would my teacher say? What would, for me, what would Ajahn Ganha think of this? What would Ajahn Pasano think of this? What would some of my elder Bhikkhuni sisters think of this? And that can be useful.
Yeah, I think if not to come back too much, but is it okay one more time, or is that?
You can.
Because the intention is to keep 8 precepts, so I try to eat a lot, so I don't eat dinner. But I don't know how to communicate that well in this context.
Oh, I see. Yes. Yeah. So, right. How long have you been doing this?
8 precepts?
Uh-huh.
I don't get it every day, but I've been trying to for roughly a year, but it's on and off. But I've been trying to.
I mean, one thing that you learn when you keep 8 precepts for a long time, I mean, I've been doing this since like 2004. Yeah, almost 20 years. You don't really have to eat that much more. And that balances out after a while. I think it would be better for you to consider using healthy allowables later in the day. Like choose something that actually is good for your body and addresses what your body may need. And then just take the minimal amount of what it is that's supportive to your body, and that's a reasonable medicinal allowable later in the day. And then you don't have to be so worried about making sure you're full. And in fact, the Buddha recommended that you don't get entirely full. So yeah, we definitely don't want to be greedy at the mealtime or appear so. And also, attending to what's appropriate in the social context and when we're doing this on our own. So I did that for a pretty long time also as a lay person, because it took a while to find where I was going to train as a monastic. And there are things that modifications to make doing that as a lay person, living among lay people or being among lay people. So you don't need to be quite as, let me say, strict in the sense of, try not to be weird. This was Aya Chitananda's, don't be weird. That's our motto. And she presented that, or maybe I did. I'm usually the one who says things. She does things, and no. We were at a Western Buddhist monastic gathering, so we have these monks and nuns from all different Buddhist traditions, and I, for one reason or another, voiced the fact that our motto is to, try not to be weird.
This is weird enough. I mean,
that's what someone said. How do you do that? Given you do that, but it was funny because it kept coming up through the conference, and people. But just that idea that how do you and the Buddha did this, because even when lay people would point out that there's something the monks or the nuns are doing that doesn't suit the sensibilities of society, then they should change with the way they're doing it, and the Buddha would make a rule to change the way they're doing it. And so you definitely you don't want to be weird, you just like kind of find a way to hold your precepts and not be an imposition on others, and not be so weird. So yeah.
If I may just add, So by the way, I did hear your announcement, David,
Hmm.
and I did see you eat from the bowl as well. And I just wanted to share that I actually thought that, like, personally, I thought that was quite thoughtful of you. That kind of, like, we also don't want to waste food at the
Yeah.
potluck. And I thought that you were also saving like a paper plate because you were eating out of the bowl. So at least in my mind, I can share that, I didn't see anything weird. If anything, I saw something thoughtful there. Yeah.
Yeah, you never know, do you? Cool. That wasn't weird. That's the problem with not being weird. You're not quite sure. Sometimes you're very sure. Other times, yeah. Okay,
Like,
well,
keep people at ease, I think, is the not be weird, right? Like, don't do something someone feels uneasy.
yeah,
It's at
yeah.
ease, like, you want people to suffer, right? Makes sense, thank you.
Can I share something
Yeah.
about that? Sometimes after KBV events, like on the way home in the car, I'll be like, Kyle, did I say something weird? And Kyle will always say, like, Grace, we're around a bunch of Buddhists. Even if you said something weird, everyone's just working with it.
That's right. See, that's a very good point, because it's like, I'm going to try to not be weird, but if other people are weird, then I work with it. It's not a problem. And as we pointed out, they might have a good idea to pick up on. Yeah.
I never hear you say anything.
Yeah.
No, I don't think I've ever said anything weird around me. Usually the people who are wondering if they said anything weird are the ones who are cleanest of everyone. They're the ones you never worry about. Serena?
I think I have two questions, if I can get my mind straight to put them out. My understanding, I think, is that reflecting on impermanence can help us have some reflection and insight into not self. So I'm thinking that it's in metta, extending it to ourselves and outward to others can also help with some space around not self, ego self.
Mm-hmm.
That's kind of the first part. So, and then wondering if you could speak a little more to fear in regard to metta, working with fear in metta, and Ajahn Pasano's saying about finding the safe place, I think he said in the body, for comforting the fear, I think is what he said. But I know he said it's very important to pay attention to the fear.
Mm-hmm.
So can you just speak a little about working with that fear and place of comfort in the body in metta?
Yeah, let's see. I agree with him, of course, that it's important to pay attention. It's kind of like the way we started the meditation this morning. It's like be present with the state of the mind and the body. And if there's fear, then we know that there's fear. And actually, if we're in engaging mindfulness, there's probably going to be some compassion coming up around that fear. Because, yes.
What if the fear is so like terror, sort of so pervasive? I don't know. It's like it's blocking the compassion.
Mhm.
I don't know.
Okay, yeah, if the compassion, is just not there because the fear is so full, overwhelming, filling the whole screen, the best approach is mindfulness. Because when we bring our attention to that fear, we can start to it moves it out of us and in front of us in a way that we can see around it. I remember Ajahn Amaro one time talking about you think it fills the whole screen, but actually you step back and you see around it, you see the space around it. So that's how you get a handle on it. And that it's kind of funny to get a handle on it, like a name for it, like you can start to see its characteristics. Like how big is it? What color is it? Like what texture is it, right? All those kinds of inquiries increase your mindfulness and you're observing it. That's why, observing it's, and what is it that's observing it? So you can, Ajahn Sumedho, I know you know this language. It's like, it's the knowing. So it's the mindfulness, it's the being present with that presence. And as Ajahn Sumedho would say, that part is not afraid. So the part that's observing the fear is not afraid. And that's where the peace comes in. And when I think what Ajahn Pasanno is saying is finding the safe place in the body, a lot of times what we talk about is noticing where you feel this fear in your body. And you could inquire, is that the safe place as well? The place where it shows up, the part of your body that can handle it, that's receiving it, that's holding it. And just, this kind of inquiry has a softness around it, even though there is fear. Yeah, and sometimes when the fear is very strong, it's really helpful to reach out and talk to a friend. So call your nuns. Yeah. Yeah. And remember as much as you can that there isn't anything you're going to experience as a human being that isn't also experienced by many people. And some way or another, we all get through it. And also remember that you have the Dhamma. And that's incredible. Yeah. Anything else, Serena? No. Okay. So we'll sit for a little longer. We've been on the floor here for about 45 minutes or a bit more, but maybe we can, if anybody needs to take a break, feel free to get up. But we'll just have a meditation, and then we'll do some qigong together. So right now we can observe our body and mind. And notice if there's a feeling of kindness that comes to meet the experience you feel in the body right now. And see if there's anything that you would do with your posture in order to be a bit more comfortable. Maybe take a few deep breaths. Let the body settle. Now, in mindfulness of in and out breathing, the Buddha encouraged us to be aware of our breath and our whole body. And then we might feel some pleasant feeling arising simply from that. And that pleasant feeling that can come with being mindful. And my sense of the pleasant feeling that arises is that it's quite similar to the feeling of metta. But we don't have to put any labels on it. It can just be present. The Buddha says, basically pay attention to the pleasant feelings, not just the physical ones, but also the spiritual ones, the spiritual energy. And what we pay attention to becomes stronger, more pronounced. And he encourages us to bring our attention to what's happening with the mind. What is the activity there? And we can invite that activity to calm down. To be at ease. When we visited Ajahn Ganha, he said it many times, be happy and at ease. And it's interesting how much our own volition can make that happen. Happy and at ease, breathing in, breathing out. What happens if you're not happy and at ease at this point? And we pay attention to that. We can ask ourselves, what can we bring in here to help the stress, the tension, relax? So as Ajahn Brahm says, relax to the max. And as the body and the mind become more open and available, relaxed, we can invite the metta to arise there. Using whichever method is helpful to you. Filling one quarter with a mind imbued with loving kindness. Or may I abide in well-being. May everyone abide in well-being. Repeating phrases like that over and over and over again. Feeling the calm, the peaceful, kind feelings. Or putting your attention on a living being that your heart opens up to right away. Remembering that this loving kindness is spacious. In fact, immeasurably spacious. Entirely a sense of well-being and goodwill. Sometimes this time of day when we focus on metta, it can be hard to stay alert. So then we need more enthusiasm, more inspiration in the heart. We can think of acts of kindness that we've made towards others, and we can think of acts of kindness that have come in our direction. We can even reflect on or bring to mind acts of kindness that we hear about in other countries, in other cultures, in dire situations. You can see how the quality of kindness really runs through all societies, all cultures, all countries, all throughout history of human life. And if you've tuned in to the Deva world at all, either in study or in practice, then the Devas also have been reported to be kind and compassionate towards human beings and also animals. And when we experience the kindness of others, then more kindness arises in ourselves. And the same thing is true when others experience our kindness. And we all know of examples, have experienced examples of this. So how do we take these practical examples and apply them in our meditation? Besides remembering them, I think the main way is feeling what it feels like. Noticing the feeling, what it feels like when you're kind, when you do something or say something kind to someone, you help pick them up a little bit. We're going to just do this for about another 10 minutes. See if you can be alert and open the heart more and more. See if you can stretch into or flow into that loving kindness more and more in your own mind, in your own heart. So we're gonna stand up and try some Qigong. Of us. So she's the professional and I'm the amateur. You want to look at form. Focus on grace. Give me a second here. Okay, so I don't know if I ever did this with you, but this is what I do with that text from the loving kindness. So, well, first maybe you could give a little bit of like how people should stand.
Okay, sure. All right, so my Qigong teacher said that to be really good at Qigong, you only have to do two things. One, have a calm mind, which I think, maybe we're there after a day of meditating. And then the second is to have a very straight spine. So actually, if you were to lean against a wall, then your spine would be straight all the way down and touch the wall all the way down. Usually there's a little bit of a curve in the back, but in Qigong stance, the tailbone is tucked and the core is quite tight. It's straight all the way down. And then some looseness in the joints, the knees, nothing is super straight and nothing is, right angles. Just a little bouncy is where you want to be.
Okay, so when I was studying Qigong, one of the things I learned, I'm sure you do, is to do this, breathe in, and then breathe out as you bring your hands down. And there was this, the mind, you're thinking about and feeling energy come down the front of your body. And you can also breathe in, reach up, and you can think about the back side of your body and feel the energy come down. So when I was using the texts for, I will abide pervading 1/4 with a mind imbued with loving kindness, I'd reach up, breathe in, and pull the metta down, if you will, and fill the whole front of the body. Like I said, like from the core out. And then the second time, inhale up, and my mind taking that energy down the right side and filling the second quarter all the way to the floor. And the third quarter, reaching up, exhale, and bringing that energy down the back of the body, filling that whole area with metta down to the ground. And the fourth, on the left side, pervading the fourth quarter with a mind imbued with loving kindness. And then above, I would reach up, kind of fan out, and feel that spreading over the top, kind of a dome. And then below, I would let my hands come down and fill that all in below. And then around everywhere, bringing it about up to here and out. Around everywhere and to all. Bring my hands up to all. As to myself, back to the heart. And then this part of I will abide, pervading the all-encompassing world, spreading out everywhere, abundant, exalted, immeasurable. Spend as much time at this stage as you want, just feeling that spreading out. Without any hostility or ill will. What do you think?
It's beautiful. What did you all think?
So, my teachers also talked about spontaneous Qigong. Have you ever heard of that? Yeah. I don't know how to explain it other than you're in the posture and feeling whatever the energy is in your system and you're moving accordingly. And so that's basically what I did with repeating that text. Just kind of like, so you can find your own expression of it with your system, with your energy, your body. Thank you, Grace. Okay, would you like to do some more Qigong? Would you be willing to lead
I
them?
would be willing if people want to do it.
Do you want a little more before you go into some other phase of meditation? How many? Yeah, they're excited. And I want to follow too.
How many minutes do you think you can do?
Now let's see, it's 2:48. Maybe about 10 minutes, and then we'll have time for more discussion or Q&A.
Great. Okay. Let's warm up the spine a little bit because that allows, it's like the spine is the superhighway of qi energy in the body. So starting in Qigong stance, let's start with picking the cherries. So just imagine you're reaching for some juicy cherry fruit and feeling a slight stretch in the spine as you go from side to side. It should feel really good after sitting for hours or standing for hours today. Maybe finding a way to make the breath a pleasure in this movement. and let those last few cherries before moving to our next movement. All right, let's go into our next movement, spinal cord stretch. So starting neutral on your in-breath, just letting that energy start in your, this is where all your chi is stored in Qigong. So letting the energy come up the spine and then stretch open. And then again, the energy starting in the hip area, curling down. And at your own pace, opening and breathing out, curling in. Letting that movement and that energy initiate and spread up the spine, down the arms. And just a couple more rounds before we move on. When you're ready, getting ready for the next movement. This will be a little twist on the spine, just so we're warming up in all the directions. So starting in neutral. When you breathe out, just twist and then push your hands as if you're pushing away opposite walls. Holding it here for as long as it feels good. And then when you breathe in, coming back to neutral. Breathing out, going to the other direction. This should feel really good all the way up the spine. And whenever it feels good, coming back to neutral. Letting that movement initiate in the hips and travel up the spine. Every movement coming from the core. And a couple more rounds before we go on. This next movement is classic Qigong. And my teachers have said that it captures all the juice of Qigong in this one simple movement. It looks like this. I'll show you the side view. So with a straight spine, as you breathe in, the movement originates in the sea of energy here, comes up the spine, and as you breathe in, your arms just float up with the breath, all the way to the fingertips. And as you breathe out, relaxing from the hips up the spine, shoulders relax, arms relax, wrists relax, fingertips relax. Breathing in and breathing out. Imagining that it's not the muscles that are moving, not even the mind that is moving the body, but the breath and the breath energy, lifting the arms and letting the arms float down again. Let's do a few more rounds where you breathe in and out in the same movement. So breathing in and breathing out as the arms float up. Breathing in and breathing out as the arms float down. Letting the breath and the breath energy move us. Let's do just 2 or 3 more rounds. For this next movement, it's really great for closing a practice. So starting with your feet together this time. Your hands are cupped right in front of your hip sea of energy. And then as you breathe in, one arm circles around and comes right down the front of the body, breathing out. With your next in-breath, the other arm goes out, gathering up all the good energy in the room, in this world, bringing it down the center, centering ourselves within it. Going at whatever pace feels best for you and your body and your mind. Letting the breath move us. And one more movement to each side. Bring both hands to the lower belly, feet together. At this point, softening the gaze or closing your eyes altogether if you feel comfortable with your sense of balance. And then just swaying like a bamboo in the breeze, trusting your feet, your lower legs to hold you upright. Letting the body rock and sway wherever it wants to go. Letting the body recalibrate after our energy practice. A few more breaths here. And then letting the eyes gently open. We'll seal our practice with a bow. So having your right hand in an empty fist, a very loose fist. This means this is a sign of respect. And then your left hand in a flat palm. Let them meet in front of you. Let's bow, thanking all of our teachers in this lineage of Qigong practice. And that's it for this.
Thank you, Grace. So I found that very helpful for my knees and my back. And I also, through the years, found Qigong practice very, very helpful for meditation and for opening the mind and the body to the flow of energy and mindfulness, development of mindfulness. So we have almost a half an hour. Anyone want to ask about anything or have any comments at this point?
Yes, I think the last question about the metta, the method. I practiced before at home, watching some videos about the metta method. I think I didn't practice correctly in the correct way because I was trying to send love, kindness to a friend, but I feel that the feeling is really strong, very strong. I feel very strong feeling. So this time I was trying to just try to feel the subtle, not too strong, but kind of. But I'm still not sure about if I'm doing it correctly or not.
Well, tell me more. You said you felt a very strong feeling. What was that feeling like?
I wish all the best to that friend and trying to send love. I also picture the friend in front of me. I can. But I feel that very, kind of a very strong feeling and tickling, and that feeling can last for 10 minutes, but cannot last for 1 hour.
Doesn't sustain. Yeah.
So I don't think that's a correct way. But if I don't send it, intentionally strongly, that feeling to a friend or to the space or to every creature life, I feel that I don't feel it. See what I mean?
Like it's not building up and
yeah. So I feel a little
flowing out. Right. Yeah, I don't think I would say that either of those is incorrect. Just that you can take the time to be present with the energy of metta in yourself and let it build up. And how does it build up? It's through having consistent mindfulness of it, so you really stay present with that. I don't know, how did you start to get it to flow, or how did you begin? Was it just like, okay, now I'm going to just send metta to the friend? Or do you start with, like, I will abide pervading 1/4 with a mind imbued with loving kindness, or some other thought or phrases that you bring up? How do you do it?
Usually, I started to send love, kindness, wish all the best to myself,
Mm-hmm.
and I feel that feeling.
Mm-hmm.
And then for a while, maybe a few minutes,
Mm-hmm.
then I try to send to a friend of the same,
Mhm.
a female friend.
Mm-hmm. And it sounds like that's fine. I would say. And then what you were saying is that you could feel that really strongly, but it doesn't last.
I feel that feeling was really very quite strong. Maybe I put too much.
I don't think it's too much. I mean, metta is volitional. It's not going to last. I mean, all things volitional come to an end. So it's in that way, like really putting your strong attention first on yourself, and the loving kindness coming up in there, that feeling coming, and then out to this friend. That's gonna last for a while, and then naturally it's going to fade. Yeah. And I think that that's fine. This idea of how do I liberate the mind by loving kindness, by immersion in loving kindness, that's going to be more of a staying with that feeling in your own system for a while, longer, I think. And you're maybe thinking of it more like this water springing up from the ground, filling you, and you're letting that like really develop, and then it spills over and it goes out, maybe more like that. It's a different purpose though. Like you were sending that to your friend because your friend was in need, probably at that time, maybe. So sometimes, people ask us to chant for them, or spread blessings or share blessings. And so that's a kind of different intention, which is fine. So I really think both things you experienced and described are fine. And then see what it means to you to cultivate liberation of the mind through metta. So when you're present with the metta and you let it get really strong, not by pushing in any way, but just the continued mindfulness and encouragement of the metta to grow and develop. And you're not necessarily trying to push it out anywhere, but to just see what is it like when the mind is really in that moment, at that time, free from defilement. And then practicing that, giving yourself time to do that repeatedly, and yeah, it won't last forever. I mean, it'll fade. That's okay. And then you can do it again, or just learning. And then as we cultivate and we get more practice with this, then it does stay longer, and there can be, throughout the practice, developing our sila, our samadhi, and our panya, there's more and more loving kindness. And you see that in people who have really practiced for decades. You know, you can really see the metta overflowing there. And that's what will happen with us too, gradually. So yeah, if you think about this quote, like, we will develop and cultivate the liberation of mind by loving kindness, make it our vehicle, make it our basis, stabilize it, exercise ourselves in it, and fully perfect it. So just like taking each piece of that quote and seeing what happens in our practice. Is just the idea in the mind is enough to like really encourage that to happen. So one part of what you said about the fading is, what does it mean to make that more stable and maybe last longer? And whether it's strong or it's subtle, just observing that and seeing what's more peaceful. Because when it's really strong, maybe that's not the most peaceful. But maybe it was a good thing in that case for your friend. You're welcome. Yeah, Neil?
Yeah, I always have trouble bringing this up, but so for a few years now, I've volunteered as a mentor in a Buddhist correspondence course for prisoners. And I always feel I have to give when I do mention that, I always feel I have to give a caveat, which is that there's a manual and there are questions and answers, and you grade them based on them matching the correct answers. So it's not like I'm putting myself out there as a teacher. But occasionally, there are open-ended questions where they're asked about, there's actually quite a few questions over the course of the course about practicing metta. And not really questions, but exercises. And often I've read these comments along the lines of, I have trouble with this particular prisoner that I room with or on the yard or whatever, and I try to send them metta and it doesn't work. And my response is usually along the lines of and you tell me if this is wrong, that you can't really send metta to anybody. The idea is to bring it up in yourself for that person. But then I feel like, well, so then that doesn't really have any practical use for them if they're trying to resolve a situation with someone else. So I try to say, the idea is, if you can cultivate it in yourself, then you just sort of automatically generate it, and they can feel it in you, and it may or may not have an effect on that person's response to you. But you can't really change anybody else or give anybody else something like metta. You just have to feel it toward them. Is that a legitimate response, do you think?
That sounds like a very legitimate response to me. I feel like, yes, if we are trying to change someone, that never really works. The way that other people are affected by us is that we are practicing, and that becomes obvious to someone else, or at least they pick up on it, whether it's obvious or not, or they're conscious of it or not, they somehow pick up on it. So I would say you're on the right track. I don't see anything wrong with your answer. I think, yeah, if people can understand most of the time when we're trying to change other people, we need to change our own focus. And that's what you're asking them to do. You know, come back to focusing on your own mind and developing that kindness within yourself. I think you're right on. And then what happens, even without our conscious, maybe our conscious awareness of it, is that we are behaving differently towards them. And that will change the dynamic. And you might mention to them that sometimes if you change your side, their side might get more aggressive or worse in some way, because they're used to playing a certain game with you and you're not playing by the same rules, and
Right.
it gets disturbing.
Yeah, and sometimes they've made that comment themselves, you know, like I'm trying to be nicer and it doesn't seem to be working. But I have to say, over the course of, you know, many assignments, sometimes that person will come back to me and say, you know, oh, suddenly they're being much nicer to me. And, you know, right. So I think, you know, some of them get that, and I get it. Yeah, that sometimes
It takes time.
yeah.
What it's good to reinforce for them that the stronger, the more solid they are internally, the more clear they are. And even if this other person's behavior changes for the worse, you're still solid in yourself. That's what's going to make the difference in the long run.
Yeah. And the other thing that I sometimes add is that I think we've talked about this in these sessions quite a bit as well, that when someone is behaving a certain negative way toward you, you have to remember that they are suffering.
Yes.
And so you need to add some compassion in with the metta. And I don't know, I'm just obsessed with the Brahma Viharas, and maybe sometimes I get carried away and I'll say, you know, and then, you know, maybe a little you know, sympathetic joy if something goes good for them, and then eventually you'll hit equanimity, you know. But I mean, I try to keep it very simple, and I usually end up editing these responses after I've written them. But yeah. I don't know what made me add that in, but anyway, yeah. Okay.
Well, I thought you might go there because that's where my mind was going. That, you know, when we stop trying to change someone and we're being present with mindfulness and kindness, then also what happens is we start to see their suffering, just like what you're saying. We start to have compassion and we're actually listening in that way that's not just listening to the sounds, you know. It's like we're listening to their language, their body, their, you know. And then there's more compassion, there's more understanding. And what really matters isn't what other people do to us, it's what that state is inside of us. So if we're at that place, whatever the other person says or does is their karma. That also deserves compassion, and we can be happy in it and at peace. So I think you're helping them in a good way, Neil.
Thank you.
But I gotta say, like, I'm gonna go fluffy for a minute.
Oh no,
Or,
fluffy alert.
ooh, maybe ooh, I don't know. But like, I think you really can send someone metta,
Yeah.
because we've had this weird experience in Mountain View when we were in the other house, and I was downstairs like cleaning or doing something, and I was upstairs cleaning or doing something, and I was like, she came back upstairs and I was like, yeah, you know, I suddenly had this like big hit of metta. Like I had a lot of metta coming up really strong. And she was like, I was sending you metta from downstairs. And so
Well,
like, I think we
yeah.
can feel each other's kind of
Oh yeah,
well wishes and good
well,
intentions.
she also
even-
knows what I'm thinking all the time.
But like people talk about this, they'll
Yeah.
like be thinking of their mom who lives in another state, and then their mom will call them up and be like, hey, I was just feeling all this like love and thinking of you, and and so it's like,
Yeah.
I think not in a situation that Neil's talking about where you're trying to like change someone or fix a situation, but like I do believe that we can have a good effect on each other through the metagu.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
agree too.
Yeah.
I know though, for this experience you're talking about, it wasn't like I was sending you metta in that
Oh,
way. It
uh-huh.
was more like I was so like, it just came up so strongly. It was definitely,
No.
you were in it too.
You pervaded the upper quarter.
That pervading thing, that pervading thing is very different from the thing.
It's a broadcast.
Yeah.
Not the broadcast though. Well, maybe that's the broadcast. It's just- yeah, I remember that time. That was pretty fun.
It was funny.
Welcome to the Meta Broadcast Network.
Hey, that could be cool.
Yeah.
Yeah. Karen?
Thank you. I feel like I've asked this question before, but forgive me if I have. I can be a slow learner sometimes. So in terms of other people directing ill will towards me, I guess, or ill will arising in myself, like I don't know of a way to use metta in those circumstances. Like it's really hard. It's difficult for me to use metta in those circumstances. I have mostly used some kind of skillful distraction of my mind. So when I find my mind going down these pathways of, like not liking something or, feeling ill will, then I have distracted myself by like turning on a Dhamma talk on my phone or, things like that. And I find that quite effective in terms of like changing my thinking, like not allowing myself to go down that path. And the other one is, I don't know, I know I've talked about this before here, but it's like it feels almost like practical metta, like for a close relationship when someone's directing some criticism or being angry or something, yelling. Mostly I've done this with my mom, and where I just decided I'm going to do a kind act. And that has worked quite well in close relationships. It doesn't really work in like acquaintance, neighbors, things like that. And I found the thing that Neil was talking about where my neighbors have gotten more aggressive the nicer I am towards them. And I try to make an effort always when I see them to say hello, to smile, and it's almost like they're taking it as an attack on them.
Like you're manipulate. Do they think you're manipulating them, maybe, or something? She's just being nice to be able to get away with whatever or something. I don't know.
I don't know.
That's a sad state for them.
Yeah, and I feel really sad sometimes for some of my neighbors that go around seeming to be really full of anger. Makes me really sad. But so when those situations come up where I'm feeling ill will, I don't know how to use metta in that situation other than like, Mom, would you like a cup of tea, or, something like that. Like that works for me. And I'm holding a sense of like love for her, but I think maybe that's easier in a closer relationship. So that's my question.
Yeah, so just to comment a little bit on your two methods that you described. The first one is, I wouldn't call it distraction, actually. I would think of it more like that simile the Buddha used in the removal of distracting thoughts sutta, where you're pounding the rotten peg out by putting in a good peg. So you're getting rid of the ill will focus by putting in the Dhamma talk focus, and that is skillful means, as you pointed out. That is a really good thing to do. Distraction is something else, and sometimes it's useful, especially if you can distract who you're talking with. If they're going off on a toxic tangent, you might be able to interest them in a more wholesome topic. That can be helpful. The other part is great too, with your mom, and maybe adding in, maybe you already do this, but maybe adding in the things that she's done for you. After all, you were able to survive to adulthood, for example, largely because of her kindness and generosity. You know, regardless of whatever, you know, abusive behaviors or whatever else, our parents did what was needed for us to come into this world, and we've made it this far. So, you know, it's kind of like there probably are a lot of things we can think of that provide a really good basis and reason for us to feel kind and compassionate towards them and to do nice things, even when they're as cantankerous as all get out, and saying the most irritating things imaginable. So there's that. And then what is it about strangers? And yeah, I think we have to do the best we can do. I mean, all of these things, ill will and kindness and compassion, are contagious. And when we're in the presence of people who have a lot of ill will, it's likely to get evoked in us. We're like tuning forks. And even when we don't want to vibrate, we do, you know. And so being able to see that coming sometimes can help, you know. Okay, I'm going to step out my door now. Let me see if I can put on kind of a Brahma Vihara shield. Preparation can take us a long way. And, you know, just like this idea that metta really does have a palpable, real effect on other beings. When you were talking about that, I was remembering this thing that happened once when this ship went down, and this one man survived by clinging on to some, you know, floating stuff from the broken up whatever that he was surviving on in the ocean. And he was like out there for, I think it was a couple weeks or some crazy thing like that. And he would almost lose it. But he came from this village in Europe, and that village, they knew he was lost at sea. And they made up this thing where they would come together in the chapel every day at noon and pray for him. And when he was recovered, when he was found, he said, you know, I just felt like let it go. I couldn't take it anymore. But every day when the sun was up at the highest, I would feel this uplift and this encouragement to keep going. It works. And, you know, whether you think of it as prayer or you think of it as metta, our minds have this ability to connect. And you keep wishing people goodwill and happiness and peace, wishing them the highest happiness, wishing them liberation. Boy, would everybody be a lot better off if your neighbor got liberated. So yeah, just keep that going. And what we each do individually is our own karma. It washes back on us. So we want to be putting out there what we want to have wash back on us. And I kind of like that vision of we put it out there and it washes back on us. So it's kind of like the Buddha said, karma doesn't come back exactly the way we put it out there. It's not like, I said something mean to this person, and then in the next life, someone says something mean to me, or the next day, or whatever it is. It's not quite like that. There's a lot of other influences. But this idea that we put our metta out there, or we put our anger out there, and it washes back on us, it kind of like we are affected by it, not exactly in the same way, but there is this result. And so we just think about that. What do I want to have wash back on me? And that washing out there, that's going to have an effect on other beings. Anything else, Kierwin?
Thank you. I really appreciate that. And it also made me think the last thing that you were talking about, I don't know exactly the context of this, but I've heard Ayananda Bodhi say something. It's like maybe when you're having a hard time doing metta practice, like imagining all the people in the world are that are doing metta practice for all beings, and at any moment there's someone doing metta practice and it's coming to you because you're one of those all beings. And I find that a really helpful thing to think of too.
Lovely. Yeah, thank you, Kierwin. Lynn?
You want to come in, Lynn?
She's happy.
In a minute.
Okay.
In a minute, I'll come in. But I don't know if this story will be helpful to Kierwin, but one day I was leaving the Hermitage and I was going out the big windy road. And as I was turning around a blind corner, someone else was coming. And we both realized it. We stepped on our brakes really hard, but our front ends kissed, and my fender got bent, and we were both shook up. But the guy got out of the car and he started yelling at me, and just like I was kind of just a little bit overwhelmed by a near miss. I mean, it wasn't exactly a miss, but I just looked at him as he was yelling at me in the most sincere voice. I just said, "Are you okay?" And he he took a step back, and he said, "Yeah." But that interruption of what seemed to be an overreaction from my point of view, and I didn't really know what to do with his energy towards me, turned out to work out okay. He kind of calmed down. We pulled over and assessed the situation, and then finally he asked me if I was okay. And but a well-placed, are you okay, if someone is going off on you, maybe, in a sincere way, just might work. Take it for whatever it's worth, but it was helpful that day for me.
Yeah, thank you, Lynn. It's a great story. It's a great experience. Okay, well, it's 3:35. I think we should chant the Karaniya Metta Sutta in English. David, would you grab a bunch of chanting books and pass them out for folks? Okay, I think you can see it now, right, Neil? Okay. Now let us chant the Buddha's words on loving kindness. This is what should be done by one who is skilled in goodness and who knows the path of peace. Let them be able and upright, straightforward and gentle in speech, humble and not conceited, contented and easily satisfied, unburdened with duties and frugal in their ways, peaceful and calm and wise and skillful, not proud and demanding in nature. Let them not do the slightest thing that the wise would later reprove, wishing in gladness and in safety, may all beings be at ease. Whatever living beings there may be, whether they are weak or strong, omitting none, the great or the mighty, medium, short or small, the seen and the unseen, those living near and far away, those born and to be born, may all beings be at ease. Let none deceive another, or despise any being in any state. Let none through anger or ill will wish harm upon another, even as a mother protects with her life her child, her only child, so with a boundless heart should one cherish all living beings, radiating kindness over the entire world, spreading upwards to the skies and downwards to the depths, outwards and unbounded, free from hatred and ill will, whether standing or walking, seated or lying down, free from drowsiness. One should sustain this recollection. This is said to be the sublime abiding, by not holding to fixed views, the pure-hearted one, having clarity of vision, being freed from all sense desires, is not born again into this world. All right, thank you all for being here today. And for those of you who are here in person, we have some blessing strings. If you want to take one and remember something from today and use it as a reminder, we'll pull those out of this cabinet in a second. And for everybody who's not here right now, I hope every blessing goes with you from this day and that it's been fruitful.